is what I'm building now going to get better as the AI models get better, or am I going to get eaten up when the models get better? So that's kind of like a mental frame that you really have to consider as you're building right now.
Welcome to How I Grew This, where we dive into the world of digital marketing and connect with leaders in the space about how they're scaling, evolving, and growing. Hello, everyone, and welcome. You have Amanda here, joined by Adam.
Hi, everyone.
Co-host. And today we're joined by Cooper Simpson, portfolio manager at Martel Ventures, where he helps scale AI-first SaaS companies using frameworks that drive sustainable, predictable growth. We're really excited to have you here, dig into some AI trends and where things are going, and really get an understanding of your career path that led you to where you are today. Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And super excited to be here today chatting and dissecting and diving into everything all AI for you guys.
Amazing. So for people that might not know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about what you're focused on at Martel Ventures and how you got there?
Yeah, so I'll try and condense this down as quickly as possible. But essentially with Martel Ventures, what we're focused on is essentially building the future of small, medium-sized business first AI products that actually solve real problems. So what we're not focused on is like all the fancy, big frontier, open AI, really snazzy models. What we're focused on is actual applications that businesses can use right now. So instead of making these big overcomplicated things, it's what's a real problem? Here's a tool to solve it. Let's go make it happen. And that's what we're focused on. And how I basically got here is a bit of a wild story, but the short version of it, I've been in AI myself for probably the past 3-4 years. I had a previous AI started right in the ancient times of AI when
I know that's pretty
4
early.
years ago. That's like decades.
When GPT-1 came out, my co-founders and I kind of found a real niche problem, which was government grants are really tedious and annoying to write, and AI had kind of just come onto the scene. So we thought that AI could solve that problem. Turns out it could. We grew that business up. A lot of things kind of happened. One of the main ones being that when the government controls the product that you sell, it's not a very good product to have. So essentially, like overnight, what had happened was kind of when the elections happened a few years ago, every grant program that was in our system basically just poofed, and we're like, oh, that's fun. So we're like, if this is going to happen at a bare minimum every 2 to 4 years, there's probably better opportunities to go put our energy towards. So that was the kind of the catalyst there. Still a great business if anybody wants to go do it as a side thing. Like I think if there's any accountants or lawyers out there that add that as a secondary service, 10 thumbs up. But for us, we decided to go focus on bigger things, which brought me to where we are now.
So it's an LLM that was trained specifically on how to write grants.
Write grants.
But the problem is it's really hard to write writing grants at scale because they keep turning over and churning.
Pretty much, yeah. So the secret sauce that we had is like some of the grant applications we focused on were like 80 pages. And if you as a business owner are going to go apply for this grant, that's going to take you quite literally 2-3 months. And we had built this beautifully structured system that essentially could churn them out in 2 hours. And so it just dramatically compressed that time to where let's get the money in the hands of the business that are actually going to do something as opposed to having it just kind of sit there. So that's where it was. But then, forces outside of what we could control led that to be kind of, as I'd say, it was like a level 4 opportunity with like level 12 execution. So not a very good ratio in that respect.
No, I'm just really fascinated, kind of taking it back to that time before it was even like in the world, like people weren't really considering it. Like what levels of caution like did you have to take to make sure that it was doing things in a way that was actually meaningful, or like what checks and balances had to be in place for that?
Yeah. It's actually funny because the co-founder that I had, he's running one of the projects that we had inside Martel Ventures now. So we're still are in touch quite a bit. We were joking about it the other day, just how far things have come, because back then or now, you can go into ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, pick whatever tool you want. You can have a conversation for 20 days and it's still going to remember the context of the first thing you said. Back 2-3 years ago, that was not the case. Like in the same paragraph, you would get hallucinations. So AI still hallucinates is a term all the time. Still hallucinates a little bit, but it used to be really bad. So what we had to do to kind of circumvent that is we essentially had, I think it was like 90 or 120 different prompts basically chained together that would hold the context throughout building the whole application. Because I remember there was one that really stood out to me. It was a farmer wanted to build a new irrigation system. Before before we kind of had all the checks and balances in place, you put the parameters in for what they wanted, and at the end it was talking about how they should set up a bakery on their farm. And then what's funny, kind of like you kind of read the chain of thought throughout the whole thing, and you're like, because when you look at it, you're like, how the hell?
It's like a game of telephone almost.
Yeah. But then you read through and you're like, okay, no, I definitely see how, like, if you're going to install irrigation, the next best thing is, yeah, you should try and monetize that irrigation better. It kind of just got down there. We're like, whoa, we need to keep this a little bit more focused. So the way that you kept that focus was just be really good at writing a lot of prompts that were very specific, but you don't even have to do that anymore, which is pretty crazy. So that was another thing that we really learned, or that I really learned from that whole process, was make sure that everything you're building now actually looks around the corner a little bit. And the question you have to ask yourself is what I'm building now going to get better as the AI models get better, or am I going to get eaten up when the models get better? So that's kind of like a mental frame that you really have to consider as you're building right now.
Defensibility. I want to come back to that because that's super interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone has questions on that. But and I probably won't ask too many questions about the government grant writing. But from the other respect, grants are kind of a forcing function to make sure that you really care about it, to weed out the people that won't sit down and spend months writing in for the grant. Obviously, an LLM changes all of that. How do you foresee the government being able to deal with, I could apply for a grant today. All I have to do is say, read this grant application and write me a policy, and completely overwhelm the grant writers. How does that change?
I think what it changes, so we came across this quite a bit in that sense. And I think we're starting to see this across a number of different things. Like you're starting to see this in the job application market. People are using AI to write job applications that are harpoon designed to get you a job. What it all kind of steps back to is if you can create the application to get in, what really is going to stand out is what your filtering criteria is. So how do you evaluate an opportunity? And so from a grant perspective, there's certain metrics, or there's certain numbers, or there's certain details that are going to be more heavily weighted than others. So instead of the value being, and can you put this eloquent 80-page thing together, it's what are the actual nuts and bolts to establish is the need there. So can you showcase very cleanly how you have the capacity to grow if you get this money? Can you showcase how the money is going to help you actually solve the problem that you're going to do? And AI can help fill that out, but there's definitely checks in place where, as an example, we'll go back to this kind of irrigation example. If I'm a 1 hectare farm, as an example, or if I'm like say a 2-acre farm, like really small, that kind of like a house, but whatever. Say I'm a really small farm and I'm applying for a $50,000 grant for irrigation. Well, pretty clearly, you're going to be able to spot this farm doesn't need that much money because they quite literally don't have the space to take it up. So there's different ways you can assess it. It's the same thing kind of in the hiring space as well, where different criteria just get valued a lot higher. So instead of it being, cool, let's see how well someone can wow us with kind of their past credentials or writing a really good cover letter, it's just going to force the people evaluating to really look at what do I care about and what do I need to see, so that way I can properly evaluate this. So it's just going to change how people actually evaluate things, is kind of where my on it.
So basically the reviewers of the, let's call it AI slop for a demonstrative purpose rather than, obviously it would help, but the reviewer just has to do a better job of filtering and looking for things that actually matter.
Exactly.
And they can use AI for that.
100%. I think the best example I can give for this right now is this is what we're doing with all of our portfolio companies, even just from a sales perspective, because they're generating so many new opportunities. But the thing is, however many sales calls you book is kind of just a vanity metric, because if you book 100 sales calls, but only 5 of them are qualified, well, really you only booked 5 sales calls and you wasted 95 hours or not, whatever that time is. So again, it just comes down to you as the evaluator, you as the person who's looking at the slop, and I'll kind of agree with you there. You just have to figure out, like, what do you actually care about? And so is it the fact that maybe it's a team size scenario where you know that we know for a fact that if people have this level of team size, that means they have the ability to take actions or use this funding from a grant perspective. Or if I'm evaluating somebody from a sales perspective or a lead from a sales perspective, maybe one of my criteria is that they have to be at a certain revenue range. But even under a certain revenue range, it's maybe they have a specific key hire that's going to be using the product. If they don't have that person hired, they can't use my product. So you just have to get really, I think AI is just forcing people right now to get a lot more in tune with a first principles approach to thinking and just what really actually moves the needle for them, which isn't a bad thing. It's just most people don't think that way. And that's where it can start to feel like overwhelm really quickly when you just have to go through, how do you find the signal through the noise, more or less.
So if most of the listeners to this podcast are probably some way related to marketing, and one of the concerns we as marketers have is it's easier for us to reach out, which is great, but it's easier for everyone to reach out. How do we rise above the noise? If you were to say kind of what you just said from the reviewer, they're going to be a lot more principled in what they're looking for. How do we as marketers do a better job of rising above the crowd?
Yeah, so it's kind of just the inverse of that. So the inverse of the reviewer being more scrutinous, it's up to the person creating the content to just go, okay, if my efforts are now shifted away from having to create content, as an example, or like create ads, create marketing campaigns, if that's where like say 95% of my effort went before, 95% of my effort now needs to go towards just what does my customer actually care about, and how can I just give that to them on a silver platter so that way I can stand through the noise. Because again, AI is kind of doing this leveling of work where busy work now doesn't need to be a thing. I'll actually give a direct example of my fiance. So she runs a jewelry business, and her thing is she's putting out a ton of content, but now like she's got pages, she's got all this stuff. The majority of her effort now is focused just on, okay, what do I actually have to put into the scripts of my content? How can I really, really dial in the messaging? Because again, it doesn't take her, before it used to take her so long. She had a little small team that used to work with her. Now she's got one editor herself, and she just uses her staff to kind of film stuff. And it's less, the creation is less the focal point of effort, and it's more on the real down to earth messaging. And that's kind of the biggest thing that has to be there is how can you nail the messaging and really just filter through to figure out what your customer wants. The other thing on it is it also gives you the ability to do some unscalable things. So for a direct sales one that we're doing right now with all our portfolio companies is sales calls get booked in. Even though we put kind of checks and balances in place to qualify them beforehand, say when they're booking in for a call, people lie, people make mistakes, or maybe somebody books a time that may not work for them. So we, again, now, like you take all these administrative people or sales closers or SDRs that are scared for their jobs because they're like, well, if AI can book people in, where does my job go? We've shifted their workload to say, cool, you're just going to call every single person beforehand and like 2 hours or like 4 hours before their call, get them online, run them through pre-qualification, see if they still fit, and then pass them over. So they're still doing the same job. It just takes a slightly different form. And what's fascinating is for one of our companies, they started doing this and their close rate went from like 20% up to 45% just by having the people who used to just schedule the calls now just call ahead to book it in and just really understand what does the customer want. And then you feed that back into the marketing works better, and it allows you to stand out more than the people that are just carpet bombing their customers with just different messaging.
Summarize what you just said. AI has given us the ability to do more. Now it's our responsibility to do it better.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it is, interesting if you have any insight into that one particular company where, folks like SDRs are shifting their work from scheduling to actually getting on the phone with a customer. That is, from my perspective, more exciting work. Do you view it as like positioning this for everyone involved in these companies and in these shifts? Like, hey, you get to work on the fun thing, like the more exciting thing?
100%. I mean, like the classic example is a receptionist. I mean, a receptionist really is, if your whole job is to sit there and wait for the phone to ring, that's a pretty boring, it's not a very fun day, so to speak. Like there's better tasks that can be done throughout that day that are more fulfilling and more enjoyable. And yeah, it's just AI is now gives you the ability to stop doing all the boring stuff that used to take a ton of time that was kind of filler and spend it doing the things that are actually going to drive value or feel more meaningful and are more enjoyable. And so, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing with our setters is don't just message them to schedule, but actually confirm, qualify, and have a conversation to make sure that that customer gets what they need, and the person who's taking the sales call doesn't waste their time with somebody who they couldn't help in the first place.
So
And
leverage
there is
automation.
obviously a shift in skill set for the type of work. Like once you're, hey, really digging into what are my customer problems, whether it's, from a jewelry company standpoint and like, oh, I want it to not poke my ear when I sleep, or or I want it to not tarnish when I shower, or whatever that is, compared to, hey, like actually getting on the phone. What are some of the kind of methods you've seen be successful in making sure that as AI gets integrated into workflows, that the people actually using this AI are now equipped to handle what their new job and day-to-day and 95% looks like?
Yeah, it's a great question. It all kind of steps back to, again, just really understanding what is the outcome we're trying to get. So sticking on the setters as an example, beforehand, and it's funny because we have like these guys in the office, we call them young guns. So we just they're basically just a bunch of young dudes between 19 to 22 are just full of energy, and we kind of position them different places. What they were doing a lot was, they were doing appointment settings. So it was like, cool, they'll communicate with the prospects, schedule the times, and then if it needs to be rescheduled, like very basic SDR work. What we just did was we kind of went back and we were looking at, okay, where is the bottleneck from the closer? And so the sales closer saying, hey, I'm having a lot of issue. There was one company where they were saying, if I get somebody on the phone, but they don't have an offer that they're selling, or they don't have a product that they're selling, it doesn't matter how good I am at selling, I can't actually help them. And what was interesting is that we looked at the qualification criteria. That wasn't one of the qualification criteria. So we added that in. And now what we say is, cool, the thing that you need to get as the, I guess, SDR plus now for these young guns is you need to qualify, hey, one, does this time work that the call is booked in for? Like, are you going to show up or do we need to reschedule it? Cool, easy peasy. Second one is, let's just go back through those qualification criteria and make sure that they didn't just click it incorrectly or lie to get on a phone call with someone. Let's actually go double check and get them to tell you, are they the right customer fit? If they're not, no stress. Let's move it off the calendar, and then that way we're not wasting anyone's time. But it's just, again, it's just reinforcing what we're already capturing to make sure that it works. And AI helps because it takes away all that front-loaded work and lets them focus in just on the opportunities that matter. And they don't have to cold call. They don't have to do anything else. It's just, here's the people who booked in. Get a hold of them. Do they fit? Cool beans. Let's roll forward.
So you went from the grant writing company to Martel Ventures. Mm-hmm. Was Martel Ventures an investor in the grant writing company? How did you make that jump?
Yeah, so Dan and I have actually been friends for the better part of like 4.5 years, more or less. So we started off as friends initially. And then when I started getting in all the grant writing stuff, we kind of brokered a deal where he came in on the cap table. He helped support us with some like guidance, distribution, all that stuff. And that helped us really take off. And then when we decided to wind everything down, the opportunity on the table, Martel Ventures didn't exist yet, but Dan was looking to get it all started. I was uniquely positioned with a lot of newfound free time and an expertise in AI to kind of step in there. So it was more or less born out of kind of right place, right time, right connections. And kind of, they always kind of say everything you do kind of trains you up for the moment that you get ready for. And that's kind of what happened in this situation.
So you mentioned that you focus on SMB AI first companies.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of like good fits of companies you look to invest? Mm-hmm. And is it a typical investment firm, or do you guys focus more on incubation?
So we typically focus more on incubation. And one of the main reasons there is just we do some partnerships as well, where we do things a little bit differently because we have such a unique advantage with kind of the audience and the distribution that Dan has. We're able to tie products into that and rapidly scale them very quickly. So we either partner with companies where they come in and say, hey, we're looking for that level of support and kind of that level of distribution. So either do a partnership if somebody already kind of has a business up, working, running that meets our criteria, or we'll incubate it. We're focusing a little bit more on incubation just because, one, we get to build the products that we know the audience wants, and two, it's just a bit of a cleaner process all around. But regardless, what we focus on, so some examples, one really easy one is we've got one company called Atlas that does AI voice agents. So actually, funny enough, on sales, one of the main core features of it is speed to lead. So anytime you get a lead from a form online, it has a scarily human sounding voice agent will just will call or
I've gotten
get
those
Sometimes
calls.
I'm
I've
not
gotten those.
sure when I'm on the
Yeah.
phone. Sometimes I feel like I've
They're
encountered
getting pretty
it.
darn good, but essentially we'll do that initial qualification layer and schedule in if it needs to. So kind of speed to lead with AI voice is a huge one. We've got another company called Frank that we've incubated that's like an AI fractional CFO. So you tie in all your kind of different financial data sources and get insights on your data. So instead of having to go hire a really expensive financial person, you can use that. We've got another tool called Hero that's a hiring and recruiting kind of evaluator. So if you need to hire somebody, you put a job posting out, you get 200 applications. They're all AI focused. It runs them through a whole process, evaluates, and says, hey, here are the actual 5 people that meet what your job description and organization is looking for. There's a ton of different ones. We've got 9 up and going, and then we've got 2 more that will be up and live in the next 3-ish months, more or less. So we're moving and grooving.
So you've got a distribution network with a bunch of receptive clients, and then you want to take AI first companies that service SMBs and help push them out to a distribution network. So give me an example of like, and you're actively recruiting new companies all the time, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like you're like, hey, it's like Y Combinator, where like, right, it's in the spring. You want people to reach out to you today. And what would be an ideal company that would say, hey, this is something we want to go move with?
Yeah. So, I mean, like we've got a bunch of stuff kind of in the pipeline right now in terms of ideas that we're looking at. So really what it boils down to for us, more importantly than kind of the idea, is the person. So because ideas can ebb and flow and change and shift. And one of the things right now is there's ideas that we were looking at or that we were really high on 5 months ago that aren't even worth exploring as a product anymore. So we've got an idea of what we want to build over the course of the next year. But we want to build about like 10 to 12 new products in the next year or so in 2026. So we're looking for like 10 to 12 more people. But what the biggest criteria for us that we're looking for is somebody who either has a little bit of experience kind of being an operator or building, or somebody who is like a deep domain expert in a specific industry that really deeply understands a problem that a general SMB customer has, and will kind of blanket identify an SMB in our terms as someone between like 500,000 and 20 million in revenue and a team size of like 1 to 15 people, more or less, is kind of like the sweet spot we have. But a little bit of experience as an operator, so that way we don't have to babysit someone to know how to manage people, and then a deep understanding in terms of the problem or a deep passion of the problem that they're looking to solve. Like there was one founder, we didn't end up doing a deal with this company, but it was fascinating. It was these 2 young guys that had worked in a packing facility for basically a shipping and logistics packing facility. And they built this AI scanner tool that would read a bill of lading and an invoice sheet and take all the data, directly enter it right into their ERP system without them having to touch it. And it saved them 14 hours a week just of manual clicking, checking, moving data from one place to another. And I'm like, well, talk about cool. I mean, that was a very niche specific product. So we were like, that's maybe a little bit too specific, but it was just like the passion they have for this like crazy niche idea was so cool. And just more people, we're looking for people that are really passionate, want to build something awesome, and have a little bit of experience that are ready to just basically join onto a rocket ship, more or less.
And so are you helping them build their ideas and products? Are you just infusing capital, or like what would be like, give me an example of a business, theoretical or example, comes in and utilizes you guys most effectively?
Yeah. So the way that we do it is we put a little bit of capital in to cover some like operating costs and kind of living expenses for founders. And then what we do is we kind of think of it as like 2 positions. There's either a business leader or a technical leader. So CEO, CTO, more or less. If there's no technical person, we actually have some developing capabilities on our end to backfill that role. So if someone's like, cool, I got a great one, I just need a little bit of help building out, we've got the capacity for that, but we don't have unlimited capacity there. So in a perfect world, we kind of find both peas in the same pod, or somebody that's coming who knows somebody that they really like working with. Because at the end of the day, we can find a technical person, but if that person and the business leader are oil and water, that's also a recipe for disaster. So we'll kind of help. We look for those scenarios. We put a bit of capital in to help support the initial stages. And then what we do is we sprint towards getting a minimum viable product built or a minimum viable offer. We launch that into kind of a narrow subset of the audience that we control. We get feedback. we fund predominantly through user funding. So customers vote with their dollars. We find out very quickly if it's an idea people want or if they don't want. If they don't want it, cool, let's readjust. If they do want it, happy days. Let's go put a bit more energy towards fully building it out. And then it gives us all the markers to say, in a very quick time frame, usually within about the first month, are we on the right path or do we need to pivot here? And that's how we can kind of help make sure that we're not going too far down a path that might lead us to nowhere.
So outside of feedback and whether people are latching onto it, what separates the teams that sustain growth from the ones that stall out?
Probably the biggest one, and I think this is also a shift that's happening now because of AI in general, but it's the teams that are just razor focused on growing and getting more customers and sales. So like sales motions and marketing are more important than product. Product's still very important, but the old way used to be you spend a bunch of time and money building the product and then you sell that to the customer. Now it's go sell the customer, let them tell you what you want. And then with all these AI coding tools, you can put the product together pretty darn quickly and you can kind of fill in the gaps on fulfillment. So as the teams that are just like, cool, let's go talk to customers, let's go bring them in, let's go just sprint towards feedback. Those are the teams that scale up and grow the fastest.
So faster iteration of product market fit rather than building the best product. You mentioned something earlier that is the obvious next question here, which is how do you protect yourself against being overrun by the models? So one thing that Sam Altman says is if you're building towards something that we're going to build, we're going to outpace you. Like if you're doing something that ChatGPT is already doing, you're going to be outpaced. And in the last couple of years, I've watched a bunch of my businesses run by my buddies struggle to remain relevant. How do you protect yourself against the AI models over eclipsing you?
Yeah, so that's kind of core to our ethos of build products that solve real problems, not products that do something because AI can now do it. So inevitably, and again, in 5 years, who the heck knows? Anybody who says they know is kind of off their rocker. But at least for right now, if you pick a specific problem to go solve, there's a good likelihood that that niche problem isn't going to go be the main focus in the crosshairs of an OpenAI, for example. So like the speed to lead, it's a big problem, but it's not $40 billion problem that like OpenAI is going to go after. So you want to kind of pick, if you pick a specific lane, that's kind of step one. Step two then is you actually have to get like a specific data advantage. So the more data and the more reps you get in a specific vertical or in a specific product, the better off you're going to be because now you are the go-to tool to solve that problem. And I think this is really important because in the last little while where the puck is going, not to get too high level on everything, but there's a world where very quickly in the next 1 year, maybe by the end of 2026, definitely in 2027, humans won't be using software tools as much anymore. It's going to be AI agents using software tools. So the reason why getting the data is so important is because if you can build your product to specifically do one thing really well, that is going to be a unique advantage that other agents, or when businesses start using AI agents more, they're going to want to give it the best tool for the job. And if you can be the best tool for the job because you've got the data advantage, that's how you really win. And then if you couple that on top of really focusing on distribution, you build this flywheel where the more people you bring on, the more feedback you get, the better you can make the product. The better you make the product, the better your data advantage is. The better your data advantage is, the stickier the product is. And the stickier the product is, and the more painful it is to remove from someone's workflow, the more it's going to stay locked in there no matter what kind of happens with other tools and other models. And if you kind of get that flywheel going, you can really build, is anybody fully defensible? Who the heck knows? But at least if you can kind of get that concoction built in there, it's going to be a lot harder to rip it away from someone, because the example I give is just a really easy one. But so with the AI voice agent tool we have, if I have a business and I've got 5 AI voice agents set up that are all doing different tasks, and they know my business, they know all my data, they've done thousands of conversations and phone calls for me, so they're trained on everything I've got. Even if another model or even if another product comes out 6 months, a year from now, that is better. Like it can just do more, it's faster, the voice sounds crisper, but it doesn't have that built-in history. I don't want to switch because then I have to go retrain this new one on all my stuff, and it might take X amount of time for it to get there. So that's really where the advantages lie. And it really just comes down to the companies that move fast are the ones that are going to win. And I think if you're focused right now on trying to go raise a bunch of money, spend 6 months building, you're going to miss the boat in terms of how quickly you can actually get customer feedback and those advantages.
That was rich.
I'm curious about your take on something because you mentioned that, if it's agent-led, that the best tool for the job is the winner. But you also talked about the flywheel and the stickiness, which, lends itself to, tools that consolidate, where they handle several problems and it's baked in and it's one that your organization uses. So in this future world, call it a year out, even though no one can really speak to it, I would love to hear your theory there. Does it make sense for companies to continue to expand what they can tackle to make themselves stickier in more places for companies? Or are you suggesting that laser focus in one area is the way to be defensible in the future?
I would say the more specific you can be, the better. And I think again, not to get too deep into the weeds, but OpenAI is kind of given a little bit of a sliver into where their thought process is going on all of this. With it, for anybody who's keeping up with the news, they opened up the ability for other companies to tie in an SDK and an API so that you can use the app inside of an OpenAI dashboard. So this is where the thinking that we have kind of goes, which is, all right, clearly OpenAI with this move is saying we're never going to have the same travel expertise that Expedia has. Like, we're just never going to build up that level of depth of expertise in how to book flights, hotels, and cars that Expedia has. So if we can use Expedia as a tool, therefore we win. So in Expedia's case, their best interest is to just absolutely dominate travel booking. In the case of, let's say, Atlas, this one phone product that we have, assuming that in the future, well, right now we can we'll be able to tie into OpenAI's ecosystem very quickly. But the play there is we don't need to go do a million things. What we just need to be very focused on is how can we just be the best phone service for these 5 specific kind of use cases. And if we can master that, then yes, everything will kind of consolidate into kind of some of these like bigger AI operating systems, so to speak. So like OpenAI, maybe it's Anthropic, maybe it's a Grok type scenario. Who knows? I think those guys are going to fight out a pretty bloody battle to figure out who wins that space. But whoever wins that space, they're going to need and they're going to have to rely on a lot of these tools to perform specific tasks as people start to use that one tool as kind of your main interface. So that's kind of the cleanest way to kind of wrap a bow on that thought process.
I'm going to read back to you the strategy and then ask you a kind of an ancillary question. So tell me if I got this right. Solve a very specific problem.
Yep.
Figure out the data that helps you solve it better. Scale to feed that flywheel to make that more defensive, bigger, that cache of data bigger. Right?
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. How would you say that applies to an existing business that isn't built from the ground up to be AI first? Let's take, we're using call centers. Let's take a call center type business, a more legacy type business. What would you say they should do?
What I would start doing is, it's funny, I was listening to a podcast where someone was talking about how they're like, we're closing down all our APIs. We're making ourselves very contained as a business. I think that's the exact opposite approach that needs to be taken. What I would say is whatever expertise you have, how can you get so if you don't have the infrastructure built in right now, how can you connect to all the other infrastructure pieces that you can be kind of, the best example of this I'll give is actually QuickBooks. So about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, there was this big article. There's a big kind of news article that came out that these really large enterprise tools like QuickBooks were going to be completely shutting off all their APIs, and they were going to go build their own in-house AI chat capabilities. That flamed out phenomenally. And what everyone's been realizing is, you can go down that path, or back to the point that you brought up earlier, Amanda, like as AI gets better, how do you stay ahead? If I know that OpenAI, just as an example, is going to keep pushing the envelope and keep getting better, I may as well find a way for OpenAI to just be my AI layer And again, think of it as kind of like a silo of expertise. So QuickBooks is a silo of expertise in everything and anything, bookkeeping, small business financials, all that stuff. If they can essentially plug in an OpenAI capability through an API, a plugin, and then they can be able to use that power mixed in with the expertise they have, phenomenal. So if I'm a call center, the way I'm looking at it is, what are the other voice, like how can I add more capacity with additional voice tools? So how can I start maybe still having a lot of human component, but how can I start backfilling all the off hours with more AI capabilities? How can I start taking in the tens of thousands of hours of call data that I'm sure they have, whether it's recorded, whether it's transcribed, whether it's sitting somewhere in a hard drive? How can I take that and give that the ability to interact with a existing LLM model to start building our own process for how we run systems? And so those are some of the ways to start thinking, just how can you start playing nice with more of these AI tools? How can you start giving your customers the ability to take more action with the expertise that you have? That's probably the way I would really start thinking about it. And you're already starting to see from some of the largest companies in the world where they've completely abandoned trying to go build their own AI technology. They're just trying to figure out how best can we plug into the existing opportunities available to us.
So again, to read that back to you, we already solve a business problem. You have a bunch of data, figure out how that data is going to be valuable with AI so you can incorporate existing AI tools so you can continue to build that flywheel rather than trying to compete by yourself.
Exactly. Because there's no way you're going to be able to compete by yourself, so you may as well play nice with the ecosystem.
I would like to know, a lot of our listeners work in mobile growth and mobile app marketing. We've talked a lot about these lessons. I'm curious if any of the companies you work with have mobile apps, or how some of these processes that you've learned, or, ways of doing things from Dan Martel that apply to those out there trying to grow an app.
Yeah, growing an app. I mean, I'd say right now, funny enough, I know we don't have like a ton more time on it, but I think app growth is one of the bigger spaces right now, especially with the kind of like all the principles we spoke about, like specific problems, customer use case, like get the feedback, build it out fast. Like all of that directly applies in right now, especially to mobile apps. So some of the learnings that I would say is just, if you have an idea, go ship it fast. Make sure that if it's crappy initially, that's okay, but just get the feedback. And then a little bit of a nugget in terms of the growth that we've really been seeing is like, probably this is nothing new to you guys and to your audience, but just UGC is a huge one. So if you can find ways to get more organic user distribution, that's an easy hack. There's a couple platforms, there's a couple sites that'll actually let you run creator contests. So we've tested this where you can basically put up a bounty for like $2,000, $3,000, whatever it is, and then creators will create content. Whoever gets the most amount of views on it, they actually get the bounty. So you end up getting a bunch of creator content for effectively what it would cost you to get like 3 pieces if you went traditionally. So those are some of the fun opportunities that like we've been seeing. And yeah, just again, focus on the pain point, go out, distribute from there. Those are kind of some of the really good ones from an app perspective.
So fascinating information. I'm curious on, if I'm a business and I am interested in getting a hold of you, like, if you were to look at your perfect ICP of a business saying that wants to reach out and become a portfolio company, how would you summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences? Like, you are and how do I get a hold of you?
Yeah. So if you are a founder who has a specific idea that solves for a business customer right now, would love to reach out to you. Best way to do that is you can either shoot me an email, or probably the best way I would say is just follow me on Instagram and send me a DM. Just shoot me the word AI and what you're looking for. My Instagram handle is just Cooper.Simpson. There's no P in Simpson, so it's like the TV show, but with no P, more or less. So that's the best way to reach me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Cooper, and for sharing a little bit. I'm excited to potentially see if some folks reach out and what y'all can do and grow together. Thank you both. Any final words before we wrap?
I think if there was just one thing that I'd leave everybody with, is just right now, the opportunity is as good as it's ever going to be. The playing field has been leveled greatly. So even if you're not technical, get out there, start playing around with it, build a crappy first version, launch it, and you'd be surprised where the world takes you.
Love it.
Great advice, Cooper. Thank you.
All right, till next time. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please leave a review wherever you listen to this and share with someone trying to grow their career or their business. Until next time, keep growing.